What's going on, guys? Phantasm Mask here, and I just got out of Interstellar about 45 minutes ago. And I didn't go see it alone. I went with my friend Vince and one of his friends from work, and they're not really into the whole review thing, so it's up to me to talk about this movie by myself. So, first off, I'm not going to go into spoilers right away, but I'll let all of you know beforehand when I go into spoilers. But before going in to see this movie, having seen the trailer, I saw the trailer a while back. I mean, the trailer is really, really old. I can't even remember when I saw it in front of, but from what I was told about this movie going in, it is about space travel. There was a trailer that later came out discussing a little bit more about what the plot is, about how it is up to this group of astronauts to go out and find a planet that is suitable for human life because of some unknown thing that is wiping out the human race. And so that to me is right up my alley. It sounds like very creative science fiction, and with Christopher Nolan at the helm. Granted, lately I've been having a few qualms with him with things such as The Dark Knight Rises. I didn't really think Inception was all that. It was a decent movie, but didn't really deserve the high praise I felt that film had. And then you have stuff like beforehand with The Dark Knight and The Prestige, which are excellent films. Hell, even Insomnia and Memento, going even further back. So, needless to say, it's very iffy with me with Christopher Nolan lately. Some people would argue that we've already seen all of his tricks. Before I even went into this movie, I read a few spoiler-free reviews, and it was one of these reviews where it's like, we all know what Christopher Nolan's about now, and we know that he cannot create an original idea and execute it near flawlessly. And with Interstellar, I feel like that claim is not true. Say what you will about some of the films that weren't necessarily really, really good in his filmography. This is a movie that I feel like people are going to be talking about for decades. This movie is visually striking. The soundtrack, which I do have a few qualms with, but in terms of the score itself by Hans Zimmer, I'm not a huge Hans Zimmer fan. I don't really like how Hans Zimmer is not a man anymore. It is now a group of people that go underneath the name Hans Zimmer and compose different things, just releasing his name. I don't necessarily like that. So whoever was actually responsible for this score, whether it be Zimmer himself or someone working under him, congrats to you. You made an awesome, awesome film score. If you remember, a while back, I went to the midnight release for The Dark Knight Rises. For those of you who have been subscribed to the channel long enough, you probably saw that video. And my number one complaint with The Dark Knight Rises was how the sound was mixed. The film's score would constantly drown out dialogue, and I wouldn't know if it was important or not. And it would be in a scene that visually looks important, but I can't tell what they're saying. It's why most of the time, whenever for example, when I didn't see Man of Steel in the theaters, and I know Christopher Nolan didn't direct that film, he produced it, but with Hans Zimmer in the score, I knew going in that I had to turn on subtitles because I knew there would be some scenes where I couldn't quite make out what they were saying. Interstellar is no different. The mixing in this film is really, really bad. Granted, the dialogue I could hear in scenes where the score was overwhelming it was typically dialogue that was mostly useless. You could tell what was happening without having to listen to somebody talk about it. For example, there's a scene in the movie, this is not a spoiler, obviously, because eventually they get into space at one point. There's a T-10 countdown, and Hans Zimmer is just on full blast, deafening even Beethoven. That's how loud this score is. And you can hardly even hear the T-10 9, 8, 7, 6, so on and so forth. You can barely even hear it. So that to me is something that I believe in, at least in the home video releases of Christopher Nolan's films, they do get remedied. It wasn't, when The Dark Knight Rises home video release, I didn't notice it as much, but I kind of chalked that up to maybe having subtitles on, or maybe I just didn't really notice it the second time around when I saw it on Blu-ray. In terms of visuals in this movie, I think that when you finally get to space, and when you start dealing with, I mean, put it to you this way, this movie is wallpaper porn. If you are looking for a new desktop background, or you have a really big, I wouldn't really know why you would have this, but if you had a giant LCD or LED panel on your wall, and you wanted something beautiful to look at, this movie is full of screenshots waiting to happen, of beautiful shots of the stars and of planets and of the universe. And it begs the comparison of 2001: A Space Odyssey. This movie is, it's hard to watch this movie without comparing it to 2001. There are several things that occur within this movie that are similar to things that would happen in 2001. Like there's a, again, not a spoiler, but when they get into space, there is a vehicle that allows them, because when they lift off, they're in almost like a shuttlecraft, which can take off from planets. It's basically like a landing vehicle. It's not capable of interstellar travel, but it is capable of landing on a planet and coming back up. But then there's a bigger vehicle which spins to create artificial gravity. And I was immediately taken back to the scene on 2001 where I believe they're on the Discovery. I think that was the name of the ship in 2001. It's been a few years since I've seen that movie. And you have, not Poole, is it Poole? Yeah, I believe the character's name is Poole, and he's walking around this disc. He's like doing a power jog, and then when the camera backs up, you can see him like on a rotating disc. I mean, the imagery begs the comparison to 2001. However, despite how much I really, really like 2001: A Space Odyssey, plot-wise, that movie is like a 30-minute Twilight Zone episode stretched out 2.5 hours. It's a visually striking movie, but lacks in plot. Interstellar is a nice combination of both a rock-solid plot with those striking visuals. And I'm about to go into spoilers right now. I'll leave an annotation, which will be a direct link towards final thoughts on the movie. But getting into spoiler territory, I've read a lot of Marvel comics before. In my time reading comics. I'm aware that in the Marvel comics there is this MacGuffin, if you will, and it's been in the movies already, known as the Tesseract. And typically when I see items such as this, I wonder where they got the inspiration for something like this from. And the Tesseract is a theoretical, I wouldn't necessarily say a place, but more like an object. It's kind of hard to explain. And when you get to see stuff like from the bookcase in the film, where the stuff would be falling off, and she says it's in Morse code, it's a tesseract. It's a distortion within time-space, and I don't really know what was inside of that particular tesseract, but it's... Immediately I knew that there was going to be something to that effect involved. And it's seeing that play out in the film that I was really excited to see. The wormhole itself blew my mind. The image, in the way it was shot, it blew my mind. It was amazing to look at. It was almost like as if going through a thunderstorm in space and you see nothing but galaxies and stars flying by you. It's such striking imagery, and it's the reason why looking at some of the stuff in this movie, like going through the wormhole, is part of the reason why I enjoy watching movies, and why one day, hopefully, I will be able to make movies because of things like that. It was so beautiful to look at, and almost, I wouldn't say that I felt like I was there, but it's something like that I was like, man, I really wish that, one day I'd be able to see something like that. That's the kind of imagery that I can describe in this movie, is, man, one day I wish to be able to see a sun. I know how stupid this is going to sound, but I hope to one day be able to see a sun collapsing in on itself into a black hole, because the way that was portrayed in the film looks amazing. And again, it goes back to wallpaper porn. But as far as the plot goes, so Space McConaughey, before he's Space McConaughey, finds that NORAD facility with the remnants of NASA, and they basically have a Noah's Ark of the human race that they're ready to shoot up into space as a plan B if they can't find a planet suitable for human life. And you later find out that Michael Caine lied to them and was basically going to... The plan B was plan A all along, basically. It was to take all the eggs, various DNA samples of the human race, genetic diversity, and just go find a suitable planet and set down and leave everyone there to die. And naturally, McConaughey, leaving his family behind, leaving his young daughter, who he's very fond of, who apparently he's not very fond of his son, even though he says he is, I love you, son, but he doesn't seem to care as much for his son as he does his 10-year-old daughter. Well, first off, yeah, it screams Noah's Ark. Also, it falls prey to what happens when you start to think about a movie like this. You talk about genetic diversity and all these. I mean, who are going to carry all these children? Who becomes the figurative Adam and Eve of the new world that they find? It kind of seems like a stupid plan, and I was really hoping that Plan A was going to turn out for them, which ultimately it kind of does. I mean, the ending of this film is surprisingly open. Well, it's open and closed, kind of. So apparently, before Space McConaughey and Space Les Mis go through the wormhole, they had already sent astronauts on the Lazarus Project to go through the wormhole and find suitable planets just on the other side. And they've had beacons transmitting through signals through the wormhole for years, saying, hey, we're here, this one's suitable, we lost this one is not suitable, do not attempt to contact, things like that. And eventually they... And what I found really interesting, and what my friend Vince and I were discussing once the movie finished, was the first planet that they land on is a largely water planet, and has huge tidal waves, like the size of skyscrapers that come crashing down. And they said that I think 1 hour on this planet is roughly 7 years on Earth. And then my friend Vince and I, we were talking about this, and talking about how gravity works in relation to time, and how we had our disagreements on this, and he was believing that it wouldn't actually be that long of passage of time from Earth because of things like the wormhole and just how gravity works. But, of course, with the planet being close to a black hole, time dilation, things like that, it gets complicated. This movie doesn't do, like, what Star Trek does, or I should say Star Trek TNG, where it throws a whole bunch of technobabble at you. It throws a little bit at you, but not in a way that's too fast or too hard to comprehend. As somebody who is interested in theoretical physics and quantum mechanics, and I've watched things... documentaries on science channels, on television, how stuff like this works. I wouldn't say I even really have a basic understanding. I mean, I can tell you how some things theoretically work, but I'm not a physicist. I'm not super advanced into it. I just find I find space interesting. So, when it comes to that, there's a little bit there that I feel some people the layman may not understand, such as time dilation and how the gravity works in relation to time and things like that. So they wind up having one person in their crew die on that planet. He gets swept away by the tsunami wave, and they're stuck there for enough time that 23 years had passed. And so they eventually leave that planet, and they're all depressed because they spent so much time down there. And so eventually they have to come up with a decision that they only have enough fuel to go visit one more planet. And they eventually wind up going to the scientist known as Mann, Dr. Mann. They wind up going to his planet, which I found to be very interesting because this planet is, when they land on it, they don't land on the ground. They land on crystallized clouds, super hard, like the size of continents. And again, this is where imagery is amazing in this film. And so they get there and they wake up Dr. Mann, which surprised Matt Damon is surprise. Did not see that coming at all. And I guess none of these astronauts ever read up on what the Chinese are currently researching right now, because I believe the Chinese and the Russians are both looking to find out how to get people to Mars. And it would be a 4-year voyage to get there. But the problem is, how do you prevent them from going insane on the way there? And we already know as science fact that when a person is by themselves for an extended period of time, has nothing to talk to, no one to talk to, no one to communicate with, they go insane. And this guy has been alone for almost a decade. And they wake him up and they expect no repercussions. Now, granted, he was in cryosleep, but when you look inside of his pod, everything's trashed. The robot companion he had is completely dismantled and looks like in a violent fashion. I mean, nobody saw the warning signs, and then eventually Matt Damon's like, "Hey, hey, Rust Cohle, you want to go look at some stuff real quick? We're gonna go send out some probes down to the surface. Follow me." Basically takes him out there in the middle of nowhere to try to kill him on this planet. Damn near succeeds. And no, I mean, come on, who didn't see that coming? The guy was acting weird from the start. Find out that planet's not habitable. So then they come up with a plan to send the robot. They have a robot companion who I've nicknamed Funnybot. They want to send him through the black hole, past the event horizon, and try to transmit as much data as he can about the singularity in the black hole back to them, because maybe, just maybe, they can go through the black hole and be able to save the human race. Maybe. So McConaughey pulls a whole switcheroo on Anne Hathaway and says, "You're going back through the wormhole. You're going back to Earth." Or you're going... Actually, no, it doesn't even send her back to Earth. Sends her to the third planet, which we know is promising and super habitable. And he goes through, and McConaughey and the robot, they go through the black hole. Which, again, like the wormhole, amazing imagery. Very, very reminiscent of 2001 going through the monolith. And then you enter the Tesseract, which again it is digital effects, but it looks so alien and so foreign. I mean, it's and as they describe it, it's like a completely different dimension. It's amazing to look at, and I don't really want to, even though I've been going through spoilers this entire time, I don't really want to go through how solution ultimately gets solved. But McConaughey does eventually meet up with his daughter that he left behind again, and she's old now, and he's still 30 some odd years old, something like that, and she's basically on her deathbed at this point. And it's one of those moments where, and there's other moments like this in the movie, like there's a scene a while back, because they're able to send video messages to the crew, but once they go through the wormhole, they can't send any messages out back through it, they can only receive them. So he kept on getting messages from his son, and he eventually got one from his daughter. And it's a very powerful scene. McConaughey doesn't say a word, but he's crying at the fact that, his kids are all grown up, and he spent a short amount of time down on that planet below, the planet which, he spent an hour on, it's like 7 years or whatever. And he comes back up, and his son's already had 2 children, and one of them's died, and it's super depressing. And his daughter's all grown up now, and McConaughey made a promise saying that he would be back, and when he would be back, she would probably be the same age he was when he left, and she made a video on her birthday of when she was old enough to be him when he had left. And it's just a scene where he doesn't say a word, and he's just watching and listening to these messages. And it's very powerful. It's very depressing. And it actually made me tear up a little bit because of just how touching it is. And I guess that comes into a common criticism with this movie. A lot of people have been saying that this is a movie where love conquers all, to which I would reply with a no, it's actually science in the end that conquers all. But it really is, this is a very touching film. I don't even have kids, and I find this to be a very touching movie. Just the fact that, this one man is going out here making this sacrifice for mankind. Potentially he would never even see his kids again. They would be dead by the time he came back. But it's a very touching movie. Definitely pulled on the heartstrings a little bit, and has some very tense moments. Special effects wise, this movie is very, very good. So, final thoughts on this movie. Yes, the score is extremely distracting. Or I should say the sound mixing is very distracting. It's a beautifully made movie. Other than the sound mix, I have no complaints about this movie. I wouldn't necessarily say it is a perfect film, but it is high up there. And as somebody who didn't enjoy Gravity, if this film is not nominated as much as Gravity was when Oscar season comes around, and I know the Oscars are bullshit, they're just bragging rights for people, and how it's also a way to extend contracts with Hollywood. I've never really been that big of a fan of the Oscars, but it would be nice to see a bunch of stingy old fools on the Oscar committee give this film the credit it deserves, because it's a visually striking movie. Again, the score is fantastic, and it sends a very powerful message, in my opinion. And I know my friend has already criticized this as being a space hippie movie, where it's all about, I think he subscribes to the whole love conquers all criticism of the movie, but I disagree with it. And I know this review has gone on, it's 23 and a half minutes now. It's gone on for a while, but please do yourself a favor and see this movie in theaters, preferably IMAX. I didn't have that fortune to go see it in IMAX, but see this in a theater. This is not a film that's meant to be watched on your phone, on your tablet, or even your home theater, because your home theater is not good enough for this film. It's meant to be seen on the big screen, and I hope that this is a movie that transcends the time that it's in, because this really is a thinking person's movie. And with this year being a very, very dull one for movies, in my opinion, this was a breath of fresh air towards the end. I've been looking forward to this movie pretty much all year, waiting for November for this movie to drop. And I know I'm a little bit late on finally seeing it and doing a review on it, but I was really pleased with this movie, and I felt like the wait was worth it. So I guess how I'll end this, and I know this is incredibly informal, it's super late, it's 1:15 in the morning, and I gotta work tomorrow, but what are your guys' thoughts on Interstellar? Have you seen it? Try to keep it spoiler free if you can, or at least let me know what you thought about the movie below. Do you think that it deserves any Oscar buzz, anything like that? Or do you think that Christopher Nolan is just a sellout hack? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Phantasm Maskier, signing out.